What's up? So we're on the 10th episode of Season 1. This episode's Nightmares. And poetically enough, the episode starts with a nightmare, one of Buffy's. She's walking down a hall, and we start to kind of get into her head of what freaks her out, what scares her a little bit. They've obviously, she's 16, but she's also the Slayer. She's faces a lot of things. But is there anything that really frightens her? They haven't really dived into that too much. Really, her hesitancy for doing Slayer duty, especially like in the first episode, wasn't fear. It was, I don't want to be this. I want to be normal. It was fear, but it wasn't fear of death. It was fear of being ostracized, fear of being different and alienated from everyone else. Which makes sense, seeing as she was expelled from her old school. She lost all her old friends. She went from being kind of her school's Cordelia to the outcast. And her going somewhere new and not wanting to experience that again. Especially with the stuff Joyce does, where she makes little snide remarks about, we had to move all the way here to find a decent school that would take you. Don't mess this up. And Joyce always putting all this pressure on Buffy to be perfect. I never understand the love that Joyce gets. I don't think she's a really good mother. I think she's kind of a shitty parent, but, that's a whole different conversation. There's definitely a lot going on where we don't, up until this point, see Buffy's actual fears, other than being fear of being the other. Which she kind of also confronts head on. Like the fact that it's made clear that if she's friends with Willow, the popular kids won't like her. And then she immediately goes out of her way to be friends with Willow. So there is this notion that even though she will be outcast for being friends with certain people, she embraces that identity. Which means that part of her wants to be Cordelia, but part of her is like, that's not my life anymore, and I'm going to embrace what it has become. But after that little bit of, who is she and what does she really want in the first episode, we don't really dive into the fear of Buffy all that much. So seeing her have nightmares about vampires and the Master and all that is very different. It's jarring. It's like, well, of course she has these, but at the same time, you never really stop to think about it. Then we get into, her mom waking her up, and we're off to another day at Sunnydale High. The thing you got to remember about Season 1 is, like, the monster of the week never really goes away. Buffy always kind of maintains that kind of style. Like, we have a bigger story, and then we have these smaller stories inside. And sometimes the smaller stories build on the bigger stories, and sometimes they're their own thing. But it was never more clearly this is a monster of the week than in Season 1. Which is why, for my money, Season 1 is probably the weakest out of all of the seasons. I know people don't like Season 4, but I actually really enjoy Season 4. I even like Adam. I think Adam was an interesting character. I think maybe if there was a bigger budget, they could have done a little more with him. But I think it was a great character. I think it was a cool idea. We're not on Season 4. We'll get to that when we get to that. But Season 1, I think, definitely has some weaknesses to it. But that's, and I think that it's still great. But I think that's where episodes like Nightmare and, last episode, Puppet Show, where they kind of fall apart is that they feel so, especially after you see the whole the show as a whole, these episodes are always kind of like so jarring from the rest. Whereas at least Puppet Show introduced Snyder and set up that dynamic. There's nothing in Nightmares that is really relevant moving forward. But it's a shame because there are so many cool ideas in this episode that could have been explored. Cordelia's fear of being an outcast could have definitely been explored deeper over on Angel when she moves over. Buffy's fear of becoming a vampire is something that we could have toyed with as the show progressed, and it kind of just gets let go. Willow's fear of being in the pub and like being the center of attention. I'll give them that. Willow definitely, especially in season 2 and onward, goes through this big evolution of a character. So, all right, I'll give you Willow, but really, Buffy and Cordelia, I think they could have played with their fears a little more. Giles I think, is the only one where they do kind of touch on it again. Him having certain phobias of not being understood or not being able to be effective as what he sees as his role. I think is played on more. His fear of Buffy dying, I think, is something that never really goes away. So Giles is the things we learn about Giles in this episode are the only real things that progress into the show moving forward. Xander's stuff isn't really attached. Buffy's, Willow's isn't. But I will say, when we get to Xander's part, there is a moment. Xander does have a character moment in here that I think is pretty profound. So, but we'll get to that in a moment. So story-wise, we're at school, and Cordelia's being her normal, obnoxious self, and this dude is reading from a book, and all of a sudden, all these spiders attack him just out of nowhere, freak him out, freaking everybody out. Because when you be freaked out of a bunch of spiders just came all out of a book, and so it gets us into the story of the day. What's going on? Where do these spiders come from? Why do they attack? How did we get here? And then we start to get other nightmares slowly start to come into play. Xander, it's really Xander's first nightmare. Xander has 2 in this episode. And his first nightmare is walking into class naked. Now, obviously, it's a TV show. They put him in his boxers instead of nude. Which, to me, was always a weird choice. You could have had him walk in nude and obviously just not show the audience that he's nude, It's weird because who has a nightmare about showing up to school in your boxers? It's a weird, it felt like a cheap get out of jail free card. You know what I mean? Like, they could have just done the actual nightmare that we've all had at one point in time and just not showed that part. Would have been easy. They do it in other episodes where people are implied to be naked and you don't show us that they're naked. Like, it's not that complicated an idea. So I did find that to be kind of a cheat. But I think it's a relatable fear. We all have that. We all show. I don't know what that dream comes from, but I mean, pretty much everyone I know has had that dream at least once. And so they start looking into what is causing this. Buffy's the first to notice that, when the spider happened and other things, that there's this little kid there. So the kid becomes important. And so we start to see other people's nightmares too. Like, this girl goes downstairs to smoke and gets the shit beat out of her, and the little kid's there again. This biker dude's talking about respect, and he's gonna beat some dude's ass, and then his mom shows up. Cordelia becomes a nerd, and he's like, I'm not even in the chess club. It's fucking hilarious. And this kid is everywhere. And there's this troll creature who beats up the girl in the basement, calling out for lucky number 19, which becomes important. Meanwhile, there's this whole subplot with Buffy. Her dad is coming to take her for the weekend. Her dad obviously still lives in LA. She now lives in Sunnydale, so she doesn't get to see her dad a whole lot. So the one fear we get from Buffy that I feel like should have been explored more is this fear that her actions in LA is what caused the divorce, and that her dad doesn't want to be part of her life. And by the time we get to the part in the show where her dad doesn't want to be in her life, which is I think season 5 after Joyce dies, they don't really dwell on the alienation of her dad. It's just kind of oh, he doesn't talk to me. It's such a throwaway thing that could have been a bigger part. I think that was a missed opportunity. But I think it's also Giles is there, and Giles is such the father figure. Great example of non-toxic masculinity. He's there. He's paternal. He's never, I'm the man, I need to be in charge. He's just, let me help you. You're going to do this, but I'll be here to guide you. It's just such a great parental figure that it would be weird if she's like, where's my dad? I need my dad. Because, her dad's not Giles. But we do start to then get to the Scooby spheres. Giles gets lost in the stacks because he can't read. Um, Willow it has a fear of public speaking, so she has to put on like a opera or yodel thing. I don't know. It's weird, and she's so freaked out by it. But then we get Xander's where he finds a candy bar and then he's attacked by a clown. And this is the first of many instances I feel where Xander starts to grow. He confronts his fear. He knocks the clown out. And to me it's a big turning moment for Xander. Xander gets so much hate from the fan community, which is insane to me. Like, yeah, he's done some things that were definitely shady and definitely fucked up, but he seems to be the only character that's held accountable for the things he's done that's fucked up. They don't hold Willow accountable for the things she did that was fucked up. They don't hold Tara accountable for the things she did that was fucked up. God forbid they hold Buffy accountable for anything she's done that wrong. But Xander gets held accountable for everything. Even things where it's like, was he really wrong in this instance? Like, people love to hate on him for the hyena thing. That wasn't him. He was possessed. It's cool in the Buffy fandom to hate Xander. And it's just weird to me. No other character gets put through the extreme witness test that Xander does. No, like, if you're going to talk about characters that are toxic, how do you not talk about Willow? Not really in season 1, but as the show progresses, incredibly toxic character. Never gets talked about. Tara almost kills everyone from putting a spell to lie to them. Never gets talked about. Faith rapes Riley. Never gets talked about. Willow rapes Tara. Never gets talked about. It's weird that the fandom hates one character so much and that it's just accepted. But what are you going to do? I do love that Xander has this moment to shine where he confronts his fear and actually feels cathartic afterwards. He feels better. It's like a weight that has been on him since he was a kid was suddenly lifted because he faced this trauma. And I love that for him. Then we get to Giles' other fear, that Buffy dies, which is mixed in with Buffy's fear that she gets turned into a vampire. So she spends the rest of the episode kind of in vamp face. It's kind of cool seeing vampire Buffy. But then we figure out that the kid, Lucky 19, he's a Little League kid. He plays Little League. And he lost the game. He missed a hit. The game was lost. And the coach beat the shit out of him. What the fuck is wrong with people? It's a Little League game. It's that dire that you're going to physically assault and beat up a child and put him in a coma? That's insane. That is literally insane. And the fact that the coach goes to the hospital every day to check on the kid, bonkers. We find this out because Buffy and them follow the kid back to the hospital, see he's in a coma, and then convince him that it's going to be okay if he wakes up. Convince him that it's going to be okay to wake up, which means he's choosing to stay in this coma because he's so terrified of his coach. His coach might actually be the biggest villain in this entire universe. This kid is staying in a coma willingly because he's afraid of his coach. That's insane. This coach is a monster. And the coach comes every day to do what? What happens if the kid wakes up while the coach is there? What is his goal? What is his goal? Like, I don't understand it. It's insane to me. I'm so glad the Scoobies were there when the kid woke up, because if they weren't, what would have happened? It's such a dark thought, but you kind of have to think it, because this dude was going there every day. He had to have been having some kind of plan to save himself from getting in trouble. But the second he finds out that the kid's awake, he bolts, and Xander and Giles stop him and hold him. And that's kind of the resolution of the episode. Oh yeah, Buffy's fear does. Buffy's other fear, I forgot, was Hank, her dad, telling her that she's responsible for the divorce. He doesn't enjoy spending time with her. He never wants to see her again. Very devastating. Buffy also has a fear of a history test, and I do love that she's like, I haven't been there since the first day of class. the very first scene with her and Cordelia, when she meets Cordelia, was the history class. So it's implied that she hasn't been to class since that day. It's insane. So then she fails the test and yada yada yada. Like little nightmares. That one and the Xander showing up quasi naked. Dreams that are relatable that we've all had. But the Hank one was so emotionally devastating. And then the Hank one was so just emotionally devastating. Like how do you wrap your head around that? I know as someone who doesn't have a father, and got a letter from my dad when I was like 11 saying, "Oh, I'm coming to the United States, but I can't see you because I owe people money," which is code for I'm a deadbeat and don't pay child support. It does do something to you. It does affect you. It is just like, damn, this person who's supposed to be there for me, I mean so little to them that they just blanketly tell you, go fuck yourself. I don't care. It's wild. So I definitely sympathize with Buffy in this episode. That is kind of a heart-wrenching thing to watch. And I wouldn't really wish that on anyone. But luckily, at the end of the episode, she goes off with her dad. That was all a nightmare, wasn't real, and everything's good. She's happy, her dad's happy. There's a funny little moment where Willow Alexander, so when Buffy was a vampire, did he still find her hot? And he's like, yeah, I have problems. Which is just so stupid, but kind of funny at the same time. I will say, this episode isn't a favorite of mine, but it is still good. It still has some laughs. It still has some interesting character development. I just wish that they followed through on some of that character development as the show went on. A lot of it is kind of lost in the shuffle of the universe. I did notice for the first time watching it now, they're kind of call forwards to the musical. Like, oh, if this was a dream, it'd be a wacky musical comedy, which kind of throwaway line. But the reason why I put that together was because Willow, when talking about spiders, is like, what do they need so many legs for anyways? And the way she said it, the cadence in which she said it, is very reminiscent of Anya talking about bunnies and what do they need great eyesight for anyways. It's very much the same kind of cadence and Whedon-esque talking on both of these episodes with the same kind of line. And I was like, oh, I've never placed those two together. That's pretty interesting. Overall, I think definitely worth a watch, but I would say it's one of the weaker episodes. But anyways, I'm Jonathan. This has been Sunnydale Live. This has been Nightmares. Give us legends.